I was expecting a child, and it should have been the most joyful moment of my life. After nearly 2 years of waiting, filled with tears, hope, and endless doctor visits, those two pink lines finally appeared on the test. I remember shaking so badly that I had to grab the edge of the sink and sit down on the bathroom floor. I just cried, not out of fear, but from a flood of happiness. I thought to myself, maybe this time everything will be different. James and I had been married for 3 years. We were in our early 30s, living in a quiet neighborhood in Wisconsin. James was usually calm, reserved, and a bit distant, but I always believed he loved me in his own way. I used to think that having a child would change things, that it would bring him closer, turning him into the husband and father I had always imagined. I had planned to make baked chicken pasta his favorite and place the pregnancy test next to his napkin, along with a note that said, "We're going to need another chair at the table." But I never had the chance to do any of it. When I walked into our home that afternoon, it wasn't just my marriage that was falling apart. I was losing myself too. The house was unusually quiet, and then I entered the living room. That's when I saw them, his entire family, sitting together like a jury ready to pass judgment. James stood in the middle, his face stone cold, holding a piece of paper. I couldn't even process what was happening when Patricia, my mother-in-law, coldly said, "Well, look who finally came home. Our perfect little princess." I froze. Then James tossed the paper onto the table. I saw the header, DNA test results. "Do you have anything to say?" James asked, his voice completely emotionless. "Is this?" I stammered. I had never taken a DNA test in my life. "Stop pretending, Lily. The baby you're carrying is Adam's," said James's younger brother, lounging on the couch, a smirk of cruel satisfaction on his face. My heart shattered. "Are you crazy?" I stared at Adam, my eyes wide with disbelief. I would never ... I looked at James, hoping for a sign of trust. Just a flicker. But no, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Then it happened. The man who once promised to protect me, the one who had been there for me through infertility struggles, leaned forward and did the unthinkable. He spat on my cheek, a splash of betrayal that hit me like a punch. "You're disgusting," he said, each word cutting into me. I stood there, frozen. The room spun. And then came this slap, a harsh crack across my cheek from Patricia. I staggered, and then Audrey and Sophia grabbed, my hair dragging me like ghosts out of a nightmare. "Let's show everyone who you really are," Audrey screamed as she yanked me toward the front door. I struggled, shouting James's name, but he didn't move, didn't say a word. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some holding up their phones. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. In minutes, I went from being a woman carrying a child to someone publicly shamed and condemned by the entire family. I didn't fight it anymore. I didn't cry or beg. I just remember walking away, my shoes still covered in mud from the front steps, my stomach tightening like a warning. I left without a word, leaving no one the chance to stop me. In that moment, I didn't just walk away from that house, I walked away from the person I used to be. We had gotten married when I was 31. James was 35. The ceremony was simple, held at a small church in Milwaukee where I had grown up. I didn't have many family members left. My parents died in a car crash during my last year of college, and the rest of my family was scattered across the country, sending only holiday cards once a year. On the other hand, James's family showed up in full force, loud, traditional, and oddly inseparable. I used to think that closeness was beautiful. I was wrong. From the start, Patricia looked at me with suspicion. She was the type of person who believed that no one would ever be good enough for her son. Every compliment she gave me felt like it had a hidden jab. "Your cooking's not bad, Lily, though James still prefers my lasagna. That dress is ... interesting. When I was your age, I dressed a little more modestly. I tried to be patient, thought maybe time would soften her, but instead it only made her sharper." James's sisters, Audrey and Sophia, didn't even bother to pretend they liked me. They were the kind of women who didn't need to say a word to make you feel unwelcome. A single look, A crooked smirk was all it took. Every family gathering felt like an endurance test. And then there was Adam, the youngest brother. At 27, unemployed, he dropped out of college, claiming he was finding his path. His path seemed to involve gaming, sleeping, and living off. Their parents. The first time I met Adam was at our engagement party. He shook my hand, stared at me for way too long, and said, "My brother sure got lucky." I smiled politely, but the cold shiver in my spine never left. Adam had a way of looking at me that was always inappropriate, too long, too close. Whenever James wasn't around, I could feel his eyes on me, like he was trying to pin me down. Not as a person, but as something he wanted to claim. One time, I was washing glasses in Patricia's kitchen after Thanksgiving dinner when Adam walked in and closed the door behind him. "It's just the two of us," he said. "The lighting in here makes you look different," he added, leaning against the counter, his hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on my bare shoulder. A chill ran through me. I snapped, "Get out. Aren't you afraid of me?" he drawled. I set the glass down and replied calmly, "I'm not afraid. I'm uncomfortable." He shrugged and walked out, but not before saying, "I'm just joking. But not everyone in this family thinks you deserve my brother." I told James about it. He went quiet and then said Adam was just messing around. It's a little inappropriate, but he doesn't mean anything by it. I stared at him, stunned and disappointed. "So if I say I feel threatened, you think I'm imagining it?" James sighed and wrapped his arm around me. "It's just ... They're my family, Lily. Nobody's perfect, but they're my blood." That answer marked the start of everything that came afterward. I started to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. James grew more distant. He stopped asking about my work, never wanted to plan trips, and completely lost interest in our fertility treatments. I went to appointments alone, did the tests, alone, took the medication alone. James always had an excuse: meetings, deadlines, or sudden calls from his mother. Whenever I brought up having children, he would just mumble and change the subject. That's when I realized I hadn't married a Manet, had married an entire family. And in that family, I was never truly accepted. I was just an outsider. When Adam decided to drag me into his web of lies, not a single one of them stood by me. No one asked questions, no one demanded proof. I had placed the pregnancy test in a small box, wrapped in brown paper, tied with a thin ivory ribbon. Inside was a handwritten note: "We're going to be parents." I had imagined James opening it after dinner, smiling, pulling me into his arms. I even stopped by the bakery to pick up his favorite apple pie and hurried home before sunset. But when I pulled into the driveway, saw Patricia's car, both of James's sisters' cars, and Adam's lined up in front of the house. My heart raced, but not from nerves. This was a dread I had never felt so strongly. The door wasn't locked. I walked in, still holding the box. The house was cold, like someone had vacuumed all the warmth out of the air. James stood in the middle of the living room, his eyes empty, void of any trace of the man I had loved. He looked at me like I was a complete stranger. "Sit down, Patricia," said, her voice as cold as a courtroom verdict. I didn't sit down. I gripped the box tighter. "What's going on?" James held up a sheet of paper. I glanced at the printed words: "DNA paternity test. Positive match. Adam Gallagher." I went numb. Double quotes. "What? Dot? What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Adam lounged casually in the chair, one leg crossed over the other, smirking like he was watching a bad play unfold. "James found it in your purse." Audrey chimed in, arms crossed. "Quite the discovery, Lily." "That's not mine." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "I didn't take any tests, only found out I was pregnant today." Adam stood slowly. "Then what about the pregnancy test in your bag?" "Funny timing, huh?" James said nothing. His face was as hard as stone. I reached out, trying to touch his arm. "Do you know me?" "I didn't do anything wrong. It's him, Adam. He's lying." And then the unthinkable happened. Adam hurled every ounce of contempt in one brutal act of spit that shattered whatever was left between us. The shock locked me in place. The salt on my lips wasn't just saliva. It was every ounce of trust, love, and marriage I'd fought for, shattered. "You're disgusting," he said, each word hitting like a hammer to my chest. Then came the slap, swift and merciless, from Patricia. My head snapped to the side with a sound that echoed like judgment. "I always suspected," she hissed, her hand trembling. "Just waited for the truth to show." Audrey and Sophia didn't need another word. They lunged, grabbing my hair like I was a criminal being dragged to justice. They hauled me toward the door. Before I could react, the door flung open. It was dusk now, and the streetlight above the porch lit my shame like a spotlight. I heard a door creak open across the street. Someone saw. Someone was watching as I was pulled from the house I used to call home. "Let the neighbors see what kind of woman you really are," Audrey shouted. "No one feels sorry for a cheater like you," I screamed. "James, you can't believe this. Adam is lying. Look at me. Do you really think I could do that?" But James just stood there. His eyes were blank, not angry, not sad, just empty. It was like I had never meant anything at all. When they finally let go of me, I had no strength left. I stumbled away from the house, my hand still gripping the crushed box. Inside, the test was shattered. The physical pain was nothing compared to the blow to my trust. They didn't need verification. They didn't need an explanation. They just needed an excuse to throw me away. And Adam had handed them the perfect one. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I'm carrying a tiny life inside me and a heart crushed by betrayal from the very person who once swore to protect me. 2 years passed. I lived a new life, quiet, peaceful, far from the memories. I was no longer the woman who stood under a porch light, bruised and discarded with an unborn child she never got to introduce. I worked remotely for a marketing company in Oregon, living with my son in a small apartment with sunlit windows. That child, I named him Alili. He was all the goodness I had left, and every time his little fingers wrapped around mine, I remembered that leaving was the right choice. I cut off all contact, no emails, no social media, no old phone number. The people who knew me best, none of them had any reason to look for me. They had chosen to believe a lie, and I let them live with that choice until one early spring afternoon, when everything I thought had been buried began to crack open like a fault line. I couldn't hide. I had no idea that Adam, the one who fabricated the entire story that destroyed my life, was lying in the ICU of a hospital in Illinois, suffering from severe pneumonia, high fever, and delirium. But the one thing I never expected was that it would be his delirium that exposed the truth, according to a nurse's account. Later, during his nighttime panicked episodes, Adam kept repeating the same sentence: "I made it all up." She didn't do anything at first. No one paid attention. They thought it was just drug-induced hallucinations. But when James, his mother, and his 2 sisters started taking turns staying by his bedside, things began to surface. I faked the test. I just wanted revenge because she wouldn't help me get close to her sister. The words were murky, but they were repeated so many times it was chilling. Patricia was the first to suspect something. She couldn't ignore the unease that began to grow inside her. James crept in while watching his brother drift between life and death, confessing over and over. But when the phrase, "I faked the DNA results," came out for the 4th time, James reacted differently. 2 years of buried rage exploded. James lunged, grabbed Adam by the collar, and growled, "What did you just say? Say it again?" Medical staff rushed in to break it up. The heart monitor screamed as a nurse was shoved to the floor. Security was called. James was banned from the ICU for 48 hours. Adam kept rambling in delirium, but what needed to be said had already been said. When his confession reached the rest of the family, their world collapsed instantly. Patricia screamed in the hospital restroom. Her sobs echoed down the hallway. She locked herself in for an hour and had to be sedated. When she finally emerged, hysterical. Audrey collapsed on the spot. She clutched my wedding photo with James, stared at it for a long time, then slammed it down so hard the glass shattered, cutting her hand. But she didn't even flinch. Sophia was quieter, but her face went pale. She went home, locked her door, and didn't show up to work for 12 days. The truth, no matter how late, was still the truth. It flooded that family like a tidal wave, washing away everything they once believed. James began searching for me the moment the hospital ban lifted. He contacted my old friends, former coworkers in Milwaukee, even hired a private investigator. But he didn't know I had changed my name, all my documents, and was living as if Lily Gallagher had never existed. The investigator found nothing. The only piece of information came from a mutual friend. Someone told him I was doing well and didn't want to be found. The only thing James had left was a single photo of Eli accidentally posted on someone's social media during a birthday party. At a daycare, that little boy had soft, curly hair and hazel eyes, just like him. He didn't need confirmation. James knew that was his son. But to me, Eli wasn't a tie to the past. He was living proof of everything I had survived. And I had no intention of letting the past intrude into our lives again. James searched in vain. Since the day Adam confessed, he became a different person, sleepless, often sitting for hours with our faded wedding photo. He hired 2 more private investigators, changed for phone numbers, created dozens of fake social media accounts just to catch any trace of me or the child. But nothing. I had disappeared too thoroughly. No bank account under my old name, no rental registration, no health insurance documents showing I ever existed as Lily Gallagher. Until one day, Marissa, my college best friend who lived in Portland, called me while I was setting the table for Eli. "I'm sorry," she whispered, hesitating. "James just called. I don't know how he got my number, but he knows you're alive and that you have a child." I clenched my hand. The spoon in my other hand tapped the pot. Eli looked up, his hazel eyes filled with the kind of curiosity only children have. "What did you tell him?" "I didn't reveal anything but live," he cried. I've never heard James sound like that, like he had nothing left. I didn't say a word. That night, I didn't sleep. 3 days later, just after I picked up Eli from school and was watering the lavender pots on the balcony, there was a knock at the door. I knew instantly. I didn't need the peephole. I knew who was standing outside, and I was right. James stood there, visibly thinner, his jacket wrinkled, eyes sunken as if he had walked all the way from Wisconsin to Oregon. That look wasn't the look of the man who had once spat in my face 2 years ago. I didn't say a word. I just cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock fastened. He looked at me. Then his eyes drifted past me toward Eli, who was sitting on the rug taking off his shoes. And in that moment, I saw James's entire world crumbling. "That's him, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't respond. I quietly closed the door. The sound echoed. James returned down the empty hallway like a cold verdict. He came back the next day and the day after that. On the 4th visit, I found a letter placed neatly at my doorstep. The handwriting, slightly slanted, was unmistakable. It was the same writing that used to leave love notes in my lunchbox. I didn't open it, left it by the cactus pot on the shelf, and let it dry out under the sun. Then came flowers, toys, printed photos from our wedding, everything I had forgotten or tried to forget. Eli asked, "Why does that man keep standing outside our door, Mom?" I replied, "He's confused, sweetie. He's at the wrong house." But children always see deeper than what we say. He didn't ask again. He just quietly started drawing pictures of a brown-haired man in a blue shirt standing next to the 2 of us. One night, while I was clearing the dinner table, I heard sniffles from the hallway. No knocking this time. Someone was sitting against the wall, crying. I stood behind the door, back pressed to the wood, silent as stone. I believed you. But it's too late, he whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't protect you. I let them drag you out of the home I should have fought to keep for you. I didn't open the door, but I cried. After several days of reflection, I left a small folded note in the mailbox out front, sealed tight. James would find it. Inside, I wrote, "You will be allowed to see Eli once a year on his birthday. 2 hours, supervised. No talk of the past. No apologies. Break this, and the opportunity is gone forever." 3 days later, a new note appeared. In the mailbox. I agree. Thank you for everything. I thought that would be the end of it. After James received my letter, 2 weeks later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the doorbell rang. While I was folding laundry, I saw through the peephole Patricia, my former mother-in-law, standing with a large white bundle in her arms. Beside her were Audrey and Sophia, each carrying something. They stood close together, their faces no longer smug but weary and solemn, like people who had just left a funeral. I remained behind the door, unmoved. They didn't knock again. They just stood there in silence. And then I heard Patricia's voice, soft and fragile, like someone who had lost the most important thing in her life. "Lily, if you're in there, please just hear me out. We were wrong. So wrong, we can't fix it." I didn't move. Kuda spoke next. "We brought letters, toys for Eli. We don't expect forgiveness. We just want you to know we finally understand what we destroyed." I felt the cold seep into my body. These were the same people who once dragged me into the street and slapped me across the face. Now they were standing under the roof I had rebuilt with 2 years of effort apologizing. But I stayed behind the curtain, unmoved. I simply slipped a piece of paper through the gap and nudged it outward. They picked it up and read the words. I'd written, "You humiliated me in public. Now learn to regret it in silence." No other words were needed. I heard Sophia choke up, then the soft thud of a gift bag hitting the porch. The 3 of them turned and left. No one said another word. They returned 3 more times over the next 3 weeks. Each time with letters, gifts, flowers, teddy bears, and apologies handwritten, printed, or recorded. I never opened the door. I gave everything to Marissa, too. One day she brought back a long letter from Patricia, written in trembling handwriting on old letterhead from a mental wellness center in Iowa. "I've spent 6 weeks in therapy just to learn how to admit I was wrong," Patricia wrote. "Not because I want forgiveness, but because I can't live with myself unless I face what I did." I read it, folded it up, and gave no reply. A week later, I met with a lawyer. Martha Lell, 56, was a seasoned attorney specializing in custody rights for mothers affected by emotional abuse. She listened silently as I told her everything. When I got to the part where James spat in my face in front of his entire family, she simply nodded and scribbled a note. "We have enough to build a legal firewall." I asked, "Can I ensure he has no legal claim over Eli? Is that possible?" Mel studied me for a moment before nodding. "Highly likely. His name was never on the birth certificate. The child was born in the context of maternal psychological abuse and severe invasion of privacy by the father's family. We'll build a full case file." I nodded. My heart didn't tremble anymore. I wasn't doing this out of vengeance. I was doing it for Eli, to ensure he never had to live in fear of someone trying to take him away from the life I had built for us. 7 weeks later, the court approved the petition to restrict legal contact rights. A copy was sent to James's address via his attorney. From that day on, any request to see Eli had to go through an independent monitoring service and only took place at a designated octate. Location.James didn't object. He simply sent one email, the first and last, with the subject line, "I understand." And for the first time in 2.5 years, slept through the night without dreaming of someone standing outside my door. James showed up on Eli's birthday every year, exactly at 2 o'clock, never early or late, always carrying a carefully wrapped gift, and the same sad eyes. Eli called him Mr. James. Not dad, not father, just the man who came once a year, played with the wooden train, listened to stories about dinosaurs and locomotives, then quietly left when the clock hit 2. Ours. James never protested. He never brought up the past, never begged for more. Just once, when Eli turned 4, he quietly asked, "Does he ever ask about me?" I answered truthfully, "No. He has a full life." James nodded, smiling with something between pain and acceptance. Marissa, my closest friend, and I started a small support group called Quiet Roots. We began with private gatherings in her living room, where women who had been falsely accused, manipulated, or had their reputations ruined could come and simply be heard. No judgment. No proof required, just listening and empathy. We shared knowledge on building legal barriers, protecting personal information, and moving forward after being publicly defamed. The group grew steadily. We moved to meeting rooms at the local library and eventually to a community center on the east side of town. A wife falsely accused of cheating so her husband could walk away clean. A teacher slandered by parents to get her removed from a class. A woman whose mother-in-law ruined her name in the eyes of the entire family. They found us and found a quiet space to heal. James's family started to change, or at least tried. Audrey quit her PR job and joined a nonprofit supporting victims of emotional abuse. Sophia enrolled in school again to study social work. Patricia moved near a small monastery. No more social media. No more letters, just a bouquet of lavender left on Eli's first day of school each year. They didn't keep in touch, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need their presence to feel peace. I forgave myself first. The rest didn't matter anymore. Adam, the one who created the storm, now lived quietly in a small southern Colorado town. I learned that through a lawyer friend of Marissa's who once handled land records in that area. He rented a cheap room, delivered packages by the hour, and no one there knew who he really was. There was no family backing him, no one left who believed in his words. I never wrote a second letter to Adam. The first, just one line, was enough. "You destroyed a woman and created a mother. My child will never know your name." I didn't need to see Adam fall apart. I didn't need his ruin. I just needed him to understand that choices have consequences. The price of destroying someone's dignity isn't jail. It's being forgotten by the world you once deceived. One night, after Eli fell asleep following his 5th birthday party, I sat alone on the balcony, watching faint lights flicker in the distance. On the table was Eli's drawing, 3 people standing together, him, me, and Miss Marissa. No James, no past. Just the present and a future I was building for him. Piece by piece. My story isn't just about betrayal or a child born in a storm. It's about a woman learning to rise from wreckage, rebuilding life with trust in herself. I didn't need forgiveness from those who tore me down. I needed freedom, peace, and a future where my child grows up free from the pain I once endured. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer, and living joyfully. That's the most beautiful response. What do you think about Lily's journey? Would you forgive if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving and powerful stories about life, family, and the choices that shape us.